I inherited everything from my ex-husband's mother after caring for her. Now he and his mistress are threatening legal action. Hi guys, I am in a fix and would like to know everyone's opinion. My name is Emma, 27, and I have a 7-year-old daughter, Lily. I was married to my ex-husband, Ethan, 30, for almost 8 years. When I was 2 months pregnant at the time with our second child, I found out that my ex-husband was cheating on me with his coworker, Claire, 28. I accidentally came across their text messages on his phone. When I confronted him about it in tears, Ethan finally told me that Claire was also pregnant with his child. Hearing his words, I was so shocked that I almost fainted. My husband and I had several fights, and despite my ex-mother-in-law coming to take care of me during this time, I was so stressed out that I eventually miscarried. When my ex found out that we had lost the child, he didn't even hesitate. Instead of grieving with me or comforting me, he left the house to be with Claire, blaming me for the loss of our child. I was devastated and cried for days. Thankfully, my ex-mother-in-law stayed with me throughout this time and took care of my daughter, Lily, so I could grieve in peace. Ethan and I had a nasty divorce where he refused to pay me child support, but eventually the court forced him to do so. Throughout the divorce, Ethan made it very clear that he didn't want to be involved in either my or Lily's life any longer. He gave up full custody to me, which absolutely broke my heart for my daughter, but there was nothing that I could do. The only thing he has ever done is pay child support every month. He has never made any attempts to visit or get to know Lily. Eventually, I found out that Claire gave birth to his son, and they have been together ever since. Throughout all this, my parents and my ex-mother-in-law were there for me each and every day. You see, my ex-mother-in-law and parents had known each other and had been the best of friends for a very long time. This is how Ethan and I first met each other, through our parents, and eventually started dating. When Ethan's mom, my ex-mother-in-law, first found out that Ethan had cheated on me, she was extremely upset at him and showed her support for me. She and Ethan fought a lot regarding his affair, and she vowed to never speak to him again. When she found out that he was leaving me, she also warned him that she wanted nothing to do with his affair partner and their child. I know it's shocking, but my ex-mother-in-law kept that promise until the day she died. She refused to speak to Ethan, even when Ethan begged her to visit him and his son with his affair partner. Claire was extremely jealous of me and my child because she was never considered family by my ex-mother-in-law. When my ex-mother-in-law first came to support me, she faced a lot of backlash from her family. You see, Ethan had lost his father a few years ago, so his relatives tried to convince my ex-mother-in-law to forgive him. They told her that Ethan was her son, so she should let bygones be bygones and visit his child. My ex-mother-in-law firmly refused. When Claire gave birth to Ethan's child, his relatives rallied around him despite knowing that he had cheated on me. They didn't even bother to care or check on me and my child. Things got so bad between my ex-mother-in-law and her family that they started to exclude her from their celebrations and family events just so that they could invite Ethan. Instead, as my ex-mother-in-law always refused to attend events if Ethan was going to attend with his affair partner. I always felt bad for my ex-mother-in-law because of this, but she assured me that I was like her child too, and she didn't mind if her relatives dropped her. I am extremely grateful that I had a woman like her as my mother-in-law because it's rare to be loved and supported this much. Unfortunately, my ex-mother-in-law became unwell, losing her ability to walk and manage on her own. I extended an invitation for her to move in with me permanently, committing to care for her to ensure she had support around the clock. We enlisted the help of a live-in nanny who tended to her needs in the mornings. As for the evenings, the responsibility fell on me. I dedicated countless hours to her care, and honestly, I didn't mind. Lily, always fond of her grandma, was thrilled to have her living with us at our place. During her stay with us, my ex-mother-in-law revealed something significant. She told me how, when she first learned about Ethan leaving me, she had decided to make changes to her will. Initially, she had intended for my ex-husband, being her only child, to inherit everything. However, upon discovering his affair, she had amended the will. Now the house and her life insurance were designated for Lily. She had also added me in her will to receive a large portion of her money and her family heirloom. It was a gesture that held both honor and trust. Her wish was for me to safeguard these possessions, passing them down to Lily when the time was right. The idea that a piece of her, and perhaps generations before her, would continue in our family brought a profound sense of connection. My ex-husband was going to inherit her car and his dad's entire art collection until my daughter turns 18. The money would be in my trust. If I passed away, my parents would take care of it. As she disclosed the details, a mix of emotions washed over me. Shock, gratitude, and a hint of sadness lingered in the air. Knowing that she recognized the hardships we endured and wanted to secure Lily's future filled me with appreciation. I assured my ex-mother-in-law multiple times that she could change the will again if she wanted to include Claire and their affair child. I emphasized that I would never hold a grudge against her, as Claire was his wife now, but my ex-mother-in-law reiterated that she only recognized me as her son's wife despite our divorce. Hence, she felt Lily was the rightful inheritor of her home to carry forth the family legacy. I understood where she was coming from and accepted her decision. Throughout her stay with me, Ethan never bothered to call and ask about her health. Despite our differences, I would have had no issues if he had come to check up on her, but he never cared to do so. One day, my ex-mother-in-law had breathing difficulties, and I had to rush her to the hospital. I was afraid something might happen to her. While my dad took care of Lily, my mom and I spent the entire night at the hospital, praying she would get better. Luckily, she did, and we could take her home. After this health scare, I didn't want my ex-mother-in-law to pass away without Ethan even making amends with her. Keeping our differences aside, I called him, begging him to visit my ex-mother-in-law. I told him how her doctor had warned us of her condition, and I was afraid that she wouldn't survive for long. Instead of being concerned for her, Ethan started to argue about how his mother had never bothered to form a relationship with Claire. I beseeched him to keep his ego aside for the sake of his mother. He argued that he had a busy schedule and couldn't spare much time. It was disheartening to witness his indifference, especially when faced with the frailty of his mother's health. Despite his reluctance, I persisted, urging him to reconsider and spend some quality time with her. Reluctantly, he agreed to a brief visit. When Ethan finally arrived, I was shocked to see that he had brought Claire along with him. I didn't object, although I wasn't thrilled about her coming into my home, but for the sake of my ex-mother-in-law, I kept my mouth shut. When he saw his mother, it was evident that the strained relationship between them lingered. The room was filled with awkward silences, punctuated by forced conversations. Ethan's behavior remained unchanged towards her, even when he saw her in this frail state. He spoke in measured tones, avoiding any meaningful conversation with her. It became apparent that his visit was more of a formality than a genuine attempt to mend their fractured bond. Disheartened by the lack of emotional connection, I found solace in the fact that, at the very least, Ethan had honored his commitment to visit. When my ex-mother-in-law noticed that he had come to visit with Claire and their affair child, she started to protest. I immediately calmed her down and assured her that it was okay and that I didn't mind whoever Ethan brought along, as long as he had come to visit and support her. My ex-mother-in-law's health was fast deteriorating, and she was completely bedbound, so there wasn't much that she could do. Staying true to my promise, I remained silent, even when Claire started being very nice to her. When my ex-mother-in-law expressed again that she didn't want to be around Owen, Claire reminded her that Owen was her grandchild too. I walked out of the room to give them all privacy. I also wanted to check up on my daughter, who looked sad and hurt to see her father. Ethan never even bothered to acknowledge her. While I was in the kitchen, I noticed Claire going into our backyard and talking to someone over the phone. The open window carried her laughter as she spoke about how she was forced to come and visit Ethan's mother. She discussed how Ethan had told her that his mother would be leaving behind everything for him, so the least they could do was visit her for the final time. She expressed how she couldn't wait to move into the house and change it, as my ex-mother-in-law had no taste whatsoever. To make matters worse, Claire detailed her intention to remove pictures of me and my daughter once my ex-husband gained ownership of the house. I was shocked to hear this and struggled to comprehend how cruel she sounded. She continued to discuss how she was going to change the furniture, repaint the walls, and even alter the landscape of the backyard so that nothing would remain of my ex-mother-in-law. As she enthusiastically shared her vision, I couldn't help but feel a sense of disbelief and anger at her disregard for the home's history. That is when I finally realized the truth. Claire's interest in my ex-mother-in-law wasn't genuine. It became clear that her motives were centered around securing her position in the will. This discovery shattered my heart, as it seemed she cared more about potential inheritance than the well-being of my ex-mother-in-law during her final days. Despite the unsettling truth about Claire's intentions, I kept the knowledge to myself, choosing not to hurt or add unnecessary burden to my ex-mother-in-law. Ethan had no clue that his mother changed the will after he cheated on me and got divorced. He believed he would inherit everything, intending to pass it on to his child with Claire. I chose not to tell him anything because it wasn't my place anyway. If he didn't even bother to acknowledge our daughter Lily, then he deserved what was coming for him. Ethan and Claire continued their visit, oblivious to this fact. It was a bittersweet situation for me. On one hand, I would have to lose my beloved ex-mother-in-law, but on the other hand, I couldn't wait to finally see the look on Ethan's face when he found out about the updated will. It made me sad and dread the day I would have to lose my ex-mother-in-law. She always meant a lot to me, and I loved her. I knew her quite well, and I knew she had made this decision after careful consideration. She wanted this for her granddaughter and always said that she could not rest until she knew her son and Claire had been punished for their actions. She wanted this because her own childhood was also ruined when her father had an affair. She wanted Lily to feel loved and cherished, even when she wasn't here anymore. As my ex-mother-in-law's health declined, Ethan never visited her again, and none of her relatives came to see her. Unfortunately, she passed away last week. In the wake of my ex-mother-in-law's passing, I took charge of organizing her funeral despite the lack of support from relatives. I wanted to ensure she received a dignified farewell. My parents and I took care of all the arrangements, from selecting a beautiful casket to arranging a serene venue. Claire didn't even bother attending the funeral with Ethan. Although some of her relatives attended the funeral, they displayed a lack of genuine concern. When her lawyer eventually contacted me about her will, emotions overwhelmed me. Tears streamed down my face as I absorbed the news that she had left everything to me, as we had discussed. The conflicting waves of joy and sadness engulfed me as I grieved the loss of a cherished person, but also felt grateful that I finally could provide my daughter with everything that she ever wanted. As I navigated through this mix of emotions, there was a sudden knock on my door. Opening it, I found Claire, Ethan, Owen, and a few other relatives standing there with grim expressions on their faces. Ethan asked if they could all come in, and I politely agreed. The atmosphere was tense as they entered, and Ethan wasted no time in demanding an explanation for the will. His accusing tone cut through the room, filled with resentment. "Why did you get everything my mother had? A house, money, heirlooms, and you end up with it all?" he exclaimed, his anger palpable. I tried to remain composed, explaining that my ex-mother-in-law had carefully considered her decision and made this choice. He started to accuse me of manipulating his mother and influencing her decision when she was bedridden, but I reiterated that he could check the timestamp and date of her updated will, which was done long before her health started to deteriorate. Claire chimed in, her voice tinged with resentment, questioning why I and my daughter deserved to have everything when she and her son were family too. In response, I scoffed at her, and this is when I revealed in front of everyone what I had overheard Claire speaking on the phone. Her eyes widened as she realized that I remembered word for word what she had spoken about Ethan's mother. Ethan looked at her in surprise as the reality of Claire's intentions dawned on him. Claire was caught off guard and attempted to deny my claims, accusing me of making things up to divide the family. I firmly emphasized that she had cheated with Ethan while he was still married to me. Hence, she and Ethan were the ones who had actually divided the family in the first place. The argument escalated, with Ethan's relatives joining the argument and expressing their disappointment that they didn't receive anything from my ex-mother-in-law. They pointed out that, as they were blood relatives of my ex-mother-in-law, they deserved to have a piece of her inheritance. Everyone started to insist that I sell her property and split the cash 8 ways. I was shocked to see their callousness and entitlement to demand when they had no right. I firmly emphasized to them that I was the only one who had taken care of her until her last days, while none of them bothered to come and visit. Therefore, they had no right to barge into my house and demand anything that belonged to my ex-mother-in-law. The room echoed with raised voices as they continued to question the fairness of the will. Ethan protested, claiming it was his childhood home, and he deserved to live there with Claire and their child. He threatened to sue me and contest the will if I didn't give him the house. I laughed in his face upon hearing his words. Ethan seemed surprised by my reaction as I went on to remind him that he had been a neglectful son to his mother and never bothered checking up on her. I reminded him that it was only when I begged him to visit her that he finally came to check up on her one time. I told him that he was welcome to try and sue me for wasting his money if he wanted. Her lawyer had already informed me that the will was ironclad, and there was nothing he could do. Lily was her grandchild, and I was her daughter-in-law who loved her and took care of her, so she had rightfully left us everything. This is when Claire began begging, urging me to stop being so selfish and consider their son, Owen. She continued to emphasize how Owen deserved to have a good life like Lily. I agreed with that sentiment, but questioned whether she never cared to think about my daughter, Lily, and how my ex-husband treated her all these years. Lily was his child too, yet he chose not to be a part of her life. I made it clear to Claire that she could beg all she wanted, but I was never going to give her or her child anything. I asked everyone politely but firmly to leave my house and let me be. I reminded them they were welcome to go through the contents of her will with her lawyer again if they pleased, but I was done with this discussion. I knew there was nothing they could do, otherwise they wouldn't have come to me with anger and demands. I shut the door in their faces, feeling satisfied that I had stood my ground and respected the wishes of my ex-mother-in-law. Since then, I have continued to receive calls and messages from Ethan. He passionately keeps expressing his disdain for me, insisting that if I possessed any shred of decency, I would hand over everything that, according to him, rightfully belongs to his family and not to me and Lily. So Reddit, am I the asshole for not giving in to the demands of my ex-husband and his family? Update 1. I thought this post would attract just a handful of people, but wow, thank you all for listening to me and giving me your suggestions and advice. As for those who are angry at me for not asking my ex-mother-in-law to include my ex's new child and Claire, I did try, but this was completely her decision. For now, I can't do anything about that anymore. You can call me selfish, but I refuse to part with any of the inheritance. I am going to put myself and my daughter first. I do resent Ethan and Claire because they broke my heart, and their affair contributed to my miscarriage. While I was broken down, Ethan added to my grief and heartbreak by leaving me for her. My ex-mother-in-law made a conscious decision to not include the affair child and Claire in her will. She had plenty of time to update the will if she would have wanted it, yet she didn't. I do pity the affair child, but it's not my responsibility. Just for a clearer understanding, based on what I know, my ex-mother-in-law had her whole childhood ruined because her father made his affair children his top priority. I guess this is why she wanted nothing to do with Ethan and his affair child. Ethan obviously knew all this, yet he chose to do this to her. Despite this, my ex-mother-in-law left him his dad's entire art collection, which will fetch him thousands of dollars. So he can definitely take care of Claire and their affair child pretty well. The people who are coming at me in the comments would not be half as civil as me if anything like this happened to them, so I will absolutely not back down and give in to Ethan's demands. Lily is Ethan's child too, yet he is more concerned only about his affair child. He never bothered with being a good father to Lily, so he doesn't deserve to get anything from us after what he has put us through all these years. Update 2. The tension between Ethan and Claire has continued to loom large. Their relentless demands and accusations have strained my peace of mind. Yesterday, Claire called me out of nowhere. I didn't even have her number saved, so I picked up the call unknowingly. Her tone was hostile from the get-go. She started to accuse me of being a greedy gold digger, claiming I stole everything that should have been theirs. She told me that she was glad Ethan had left me after the miscarriage, because I didn't deserve to be his woman. I was in the middle of work, so I was quite taken aback by her aggressive tone. I calmly explained to her that my ex-mother-in-law was the one who had made this decision, and I did not orchestrate anything. Claire, however, wasn't having any of it. She continued to berate me, questioning my integrity. I firmly reminded her that she never had a relationship with my ex-mother-in-law when she was alive, so it was absurd for her to demand anything that belonged to her. Claire then started threatening me and my child, saying that if I didn't give Ethan a part of my inheritance, she would find a way to reach out to my child and tell her the truth about me. This crossed a line for me. I immediately told her that involving my child was unacceptable, and if she even came near her, I would have her arrested. I already had evidence from her multiple text messages troubling me, and getting a restraining order wouldn't take long. I also reminded her that I could play the same game by reaching out to her boss and showing them evidence of how she was threatening me. This seemed to shut her up. I cut the call and called Ethan immediately. I informed him about what his wife had told me and reiterated the same thing about involving the police if this continued. He backtracked, expressing shock that Claire had threatened Lily. He started to apologize on her behalf, but I cut him off. I firmly told him that I didn't owe him anything, and that I was going to take what his mother had left for me. He could cry all he wants, but it belongs to me, and he can't do anything about it. I warned him that the next time he contacts me, or if his wife ever contacts my child, he will face serious legal consequences. Since then, surprisingly, my phone has been quiet. I plan to stand by my words if Claire or Ethan ever dare to contact me again. Update 3. It's been 2 months since my last update. I have continued to receive hundreds of requests for me to update my story. So here it goes. We have moved into my ex-mother-in-law's home. As we have settled into her home, I can't help but wish she were still here. I miss her everywhere, in the rooms where we laughed, the backyard where she enjoyed her evenings, and in the kitchen where we shared countless conversations. Her presence lingers in every corner of the house that once echoed with her warmth. Every day I move through a blend of emotions: thankfulness for the inheritance safeguarding Lily's future, and a sense of loss due to the absence of the woman who meant so much to us. I try to find solace in knowing that the house, once a sanctuary for my ex-mother-in-law, will continue to be a haven for Lily. In these moments, I carry her spirit with me, grateful for the time we had together and determined to honor the legacy she left behind.